All right, here we go. OverDrive off and running. TSN 1050 on the TSN app. Your home smart speaker up on TSN 4. Bryan Hayes. We got Dave Feschuk of the Toronto Star in here. What's happening, Dave?
Feeling inspired, man. I was down at Raptors practice. Raptors practice is a happy place.
It
Hayes.
really is, isn't it?
It's like everybody's great. Yeah, the president called us selfish last year, but this year, we're all together. Baby.
Everyone's happy. Everyone's on the same
good.
page.
Everybody's good.
Yeah, we've got Darko Rajakovic coming up in about 90 minutes, and I want to ask him about some of the videos that I've been seeing. I don't think I've ever seen a coach interact with his players the way he is. Yeah. Literally high-fiving after conversation.
Oh, yeah.
But like bro high fives and bro hugs.
Oh, yeah.
I've never seen that before. I know that there are, close interactions and coaches, and I'm sure behind closed doors, a handshake or whatever. But it's like bro hugs.
Oh, yeah.
After a chat,
on the court
at practice.
Yeah, you see it.
I have not seen that before.
You see it in the corridors, at NBA games where that kind of interaction happens, and it's the standard NBA greeting, right?
Yes.
It's just, they don't do a handshake in the NBA. You don't shake people's hands in the NBA. You do the bro hug, whatever you want to call it. It's, and that's just what it is. But you're right. Like, this guy is outwardly effusive in a way that I haven't seen a coach.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's not like he's the first coach to ever do that, but
No.
I was surprised by the amount of conversations he was having with players where he was ending it, where he was getting his hand up.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you got to get in here, man.
Yeah.
I need some love.
Oh, yeah.
And he's uber positive, uber optimistic, which I think is smart. I mean, why would you be pessimistic on a day like today? It makes no sense.
Right.
Like, coaching 101 is before the season starts, everything's great.
For sure.
But, and his messaging, I think, has been consistent. You mentioned Masai, who actually has, the further I get away from the Masai presser, the more I actually like it.
Yeah.
In the modern day, and I'm not even talking NBA, I'm talking modern sports.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that he still hates that team from a year ago, really despises them, I think actually makes him even more of a man of the people, so to speak.
Sure.
Because the fans felt the same way. It was remarkably frustrating watching this team play a year ago.
Problem is, and we're going to see how it all turns out as the games unfold beginning tomorrow night, Darko Rajakovic is going to have to do some serious sorcery to convince people that last year's team is all that much different from this year's team. Because guess what? It's mostly the same guys.
In large part, it's the same guys.
It's mostly the same guys. And I guess, when I look at the storyline here, you talk about the team president saying this team played selfish. The team president saying, I didn't enjoy watching this team play. And I put it together.
Right, exactly.
I picked the guys.
Yeah.
And I was appalled watching them play, which is what he said in the presser you referred to. That's great, but are they basically saying that Nick Nurse was a grumpy old man and Fred VanVleet was kind of grumpy too?
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
That's kind of what they're saying.
That's kind of what it has to be if you're indicating that things are going to be so different when there really hasn't been that much change.
Right.
Really, you have change at the point guard position and you have change at the coaching position.
And
that's about it.
And the point guard position is a downgrade.
Yes, from Fred to Schroeder is a downgrade, undoubtedly.
He's the reigning World Cup MVP of basketball.
Yes.
Something.
NBA journeyman for the most part. Good player,
very good
capable player. But VanVleet is better.
Yep.
And VanVleet, when he's on his game, although Fred didn't have a great season last year.
He was hurt.
Yeah, the first half of the season, he was really lacking in terms of productivity, but still. I guess that's kind of what you have to connect because Siakam's back, Anunoby's back, Trent's back, Barnes is back, Boucher's back, Precious is back. Thad Young's back. They're all back. It's all the same guys.
It's the same team.
Effectively,
Grady
they're all
Dick
back.
is the rookie in town.
Yeah. Otto Porter's healthy. I don't know how much he's going to play.
Right now he is.
Yes, he's healthy as of now.
Goes. Yeah.
And a couple of other vets or, Temple's here. There's a couple
Garrett
of guys.
Temple, nice veteran voice, 37-year-old, been around, will help. As long as, it was funny, we heard Pascal Siakam the other day talking about how maybe Fred kind of took on a lot of that leadership role last year, and we heard about the dynamic where, and Fred talked about it, how there wasn't necessarily a synergy between some of the older guys on the roster and maybe the younger guys on the roster, which basically was Scottie Barnes. Scottie Barnes is the young guy on the roster.
That's what it felt like.
And they were trying to be sympathetic, saying, look, the guys that grew up with social media as, they're sort of the thing they got after a baby bottle, which is Scottie Barnes' era. they don't necessarily connect with the guys who are a little bit older and didn't get social media in their lives until they were into their teenage years. That's what some of the guys on the team identified as the divide between these two generations, even though they're not really different generations.
Yeah, it's strange.
It's kind of strange. There's only 8 years, apart of some of these guys.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a bigger gap between a few others. But anyway, it is fascinating that this is a bit of an experiment here to say we're going to change the culture. We're going to eradicate selfishness, and yet we didn't change the players.
Yeah, and the philosophy is going to be, driven home that, again, like ball movement, as if they're recreating the wheel here, reinventing the wheel. In the NBA modern game, we understand the importance of that, the importance of being able to defend different positions, playing a deeper bench, which I think everyone would agree is necessary. But, and we'll ask Darko this at 5:30, like, how do you marry the idea that, you're sold on that philosophy that you need, like he said the other day, 10 deep in the rotation.
Right.
But if you don't have 10 players that can play, how do you possibly stay committed to that? It's easy to say it before the season, this is what we're going to do. But how do you put forth that plan, but also make sure that players are actually challenging for minutes and putting themselves in a position where they're worthy of those minutes? Because I'm not sure they have 10 guys that should be playing every single night. And obviously no one's going to hold his feet to the fire with that exact comment for 82 games. No. Obviously, there are going to be games where they had a couple of days off and another couple after. It's a big divisional game, and they have an 8-man rotation.
Right.
Or obviously, that's possible. And there'll be blowouts where they play 11, 12 deep, or whatever.
Sure.
But if on average you're looking for 10 guys, you can't just hand minutes out because you've decided before the season started that's what you're going to do. Nick Nurse would speak similar lines on a day like this last year, where he'd say, that's my plan. Yeah, man, I'm a big Malachi Flynn guy. And then he'd play Malachi for 5 minutes and say, I can't ever play that guy again.
Right.
I'm not playing that guy. Or he'd, watch Chris Boucher early in the year last year and say, I can't play him.
Not playing him.
Cannot play him right now. So, it's a challenge. And listen, Darko Rajakovic, I'm curious about him. He's very new to the marketplace. This is his first chance to be a head coach in the NBA. Yet he's coming off the heels of a championship coach.
Yes.
A guy who is obviously beloved in this market. And he's coming off the heels of his boss, Masai Ujiri, saying, this team, I hate this team.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
I really hated this team last year. So what are you going to do for me?
And that's it. I hated this team, but I didn't change this team.
Right, exactly.
So you do it.
Yes.
Darko, you change them.
You got to change
I can't change the players. You have to change the way the players play.
And that will be the challenge.
Yeah.
That will be the challenge when you're dealing with Siakam, who is looking for a new deal.
Contract.
Anunoby looking for a new deal.
Yeah.
Gary Trent allegedly coming off the bench, at least to start the year. We'll see what happens, beyond that. At some point, Scottie Barnes is starting to look towards that second deal. That's when you really start making money in the NBA. Yeah. These are the challenges that 30 coaches have in the NBA. Everyone has to deal with this, where every individual player is dealing. They have one eye on the team and one eye on their own career, which is understandable. That's pro sports. But it's going to be a challenge because the ceiling for this team, even if everything works out, I think you're talking 5th, 6th in the East at best. Yeah. At best. Like everyone, there's cohesiveness. Scottie takes a big step. You are not running guys into the ground. Home court becomes a place where you really feel comfortable and you win a lot of ball games. Like everything breaking their way feels like a 46, 47 win team.
Yeah.
Like everything breaking their way. Everything. And that's like 5th in the East.
And that would overshoot the Vegas over-under number by about 10.
Yes, exactly.
36.5 right now.
Right. I think if it goes the way most objective people think it will go, they're 40 and 42, 39 and 43, and they finish 10th and they play a wild card game.
Yeah.
That's probably reasonable just based on what they have on the roster right now.
Unless, I guess if you want to be, super optimistic, because the tone of this camp and the tone
everything's
of
optimistic.
Coach Darko's camp has been unbridled optimism.
Right.
We're happy about everything. Like he said, Pascal Siakam's one of the best players in the world. He's called Scottie Barnes a unicorn who could be the defensive player of the year one day. He's called OG Anunoby one of the great defenders on the planet. I mean, you listen to Darko talk, and it's like, and we're going to hear him talk at 5:30 on this show, and it's like they got all NBAers coming out the wazoo. Why, they should be contending for a championship. We all know that's not quite the case, right? They're nobody's contenders for a championship. But, the super optimistic way of looking at it is if Scottie Barnes was kind of held back last year by a couple of factors, one being that he didn't have a great offseason, kind of acknowledged himself.
Distractions and wasn't in shape.
Doing every commercial, shooting a lot of commercials and not a lot of jump shots, if you catch my drift. Wasn't in great shape. He acknowledged that himself. He's in better shape this year. And then that whole divide that we talked about where, there wasn't a real connection between the best player on the team, or certainly one of them in Fred VanVleet, certainly the heart and soul of the team at Fred VanVleet, and Scottie did not seem to have a great connection there. If those two things were holding him back last year, maybe he will have the kind of blossoming that everybody expected him to have last year, and it'll be enough that suddenly he's a handful. And he's like a burgeoning near superstar player.
Right.
And good luck defending him, because there's a lot of people who believe he can become that. Now, whether he's going to become that beginning tomorrow night is one thing, but he could be on the road to that if a lot of those kind of things that held him back last year are taken away.
Right. He has to be for any of this to unlock this season, and I think beyond this season. Like all of their eggs are in the basket of Scottie Barnes.
Yes.
And that's why the reporting came out. He was never on the table for KD, never on the table for Dame. I don't know how much of that is actually true, but I could see that being the case. I could see them being committed to him, and I think they should be. The way he played as a rookie, the tools that he has. Last year was not that shocking. I mean, sophomore seasons in pro sports is tough, and the NBA in particular is a veterans league, more so than really any other league. Like, it really is. It's late 20s, early 30s, where you really make your bones in the NBA. And he's still years away from, I think, reaching his prime. But if it is going to unlock, it's going to be him, because he's the only one, in my opinion, that has a lot more there that can really be given. Like, Siakam is who he is. He's a very good player, but Siakam is not going to be an all-pro this year. Like, he's not going to be first-team all-NBA. It's not going to happen. OG Anunoby, we know exactly what he is. Very good player, but he's not a superstar. Schroeder, not going to be a superstar. Trent, not going to be a superstar. Like, that doesn't mean there aren't guys that can have career years. I think deeper down the bench is where you need to hope for improvement. You need Achua to have a way better season.
Yes.
Way more consistent season this year. He's talking a big game about how he can defend.
Yeah.
He can defend 1 through 5, unlike maybe anybody else in the NBA. You need Boucher to be better. You need Otto Porter possibly to be healthy. I'm not sure what to expect out of Grady Dick. He's very young. He looked very raw in camp. I'm not sure how much he plays. I think there'll be a lot of nights where he doesn't even see the floor this year. So really, it is Scottie Barnes. Like, Scottie is the guy you can look at and say he can go from, pick a number, the 40th best player in the NBA to maybe if he's the 18th this year, which might be lofty. But if he is, that's a huge, like, you talk wins above replacement or wins above whatever your expectation was. That might be 3 or 4 wins.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that could be the difference between making it or not and being a team to be reckoned with. And it's only him. Like, he's the only guy. And then I will grant the coach as well. Although Nick Nurse was a great coach.
That's the thing.
But it got stale. It did get stale. You could tell they weren't on the same page. He got selfish himself. Remember, at the end of the year, he was talking about his own contract publicly, which I thought was an absurd thing for a head coach to do.
Yeah. Well, it's like he had one foot out the door.
Yeah,
even though he's still under contract.
He knew what was coming. Yeah. He knew what was coming. And I think that bothered a lot of people at MLSC, as I believe it should have. I don't think that was a smart play. I think he'd like to have that one back.
I think it had a lot to do with the fact that he was fired the day after the season.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
And listen, that might have also been a shot to the rest of the league. I'm coming.
You don't think?
Probably, hey, I'll be there. So if you got something waiting for me, I'd be willing to listen to you. Not his first rodeo, Nick Nurse.
No.
But it's basically the coach and Scottie. Like, that's what can you bring to the table that's going to really change the expectations in terms of wins and losses?
It's the coach and
so that's
Scottie.
What we'll see.
You're right. It's the coach and Scottie, and it's optimism.
And a
system.
And good vibes. And everyone's happy.
Last year we didn't pass. This year we're going to.
That's right. I like it. Basketball 101. We're going to pass. So we got Darko Rajakovic coming up at 5:30. The Leafs are in action at 6 o'clock.
What's that all about?
Well, it's this frozen frenzy thing they're doing, which is so American.
All 32 teams.
All 32 teams, which is very cool.
Yeah.
It is very cool. Like, why they would do this on the opening night of the NBA season is confusing to me.
Makes sense.
Like, that one I still can't figure out when you've got LeBron and Steph Curry and Kevin Durant. They're all playing tonight. The champs are playing tonight. Like it just seems like kind of a weird night to do it, but it's a good test run. I think it's a cool idea.
It is.
So I'm not shooting that down. I think it's a really cool idea, and the idea of them staggering times is always something that I'm a supporter of, unless it's the Leafs playing at 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock's a little early.
Then I'm not as big of a supporter. But they're in Washington, and what's interesting about where the Leafs are at, and even where Washington is, the way Matthews started the season, back-to-back hat tricks. Like, we came in the next day, we were talking, like, how many goals is this cat going to score this year? And he's still at more than a goal a game. He still gets 6 goals in 5 games, but he's not scored since. He does not have a point since.
No.
And Ovechkin has not scored yet. Like, with all the different storylines going on, Washington can't score in general, and they look terrible. They have not played well. Spencer Carberry, who was on Sheldon Keefe's bench, making his debut against the Leafs, coaching against his former team. Joseph Wall is in net tonight. What is the opportunity that he has to possibly take the ball and run with it? We talk about marketing and LeBron and KD and Steph. Like, really, it should be about Matthews and Ovechkin tonight. And I think that's exactly what it's going to be.
Should be.
Like, who breaks loose, which is crazy to say about a guy who has 6 goals already on the season.
For sure.
But how often does Matthews go, 4 straight without scoring? It doesn't happen very often when he's on his game, and he has been on his game. So I expect he scores tonight. I wouldn't be shocked at all if Ovi scored tonight.
Well, Ovi's due, right? I think
he's got to be
his longest drought to start a season. I think he's had tied with 2012, 2013. So this is a one-off or a two-off for him.
Right.
In a great career. And as much as people want to write him off, because he has looked a little slow. He doesn't he had the 2 games in a row where he didn't have a shot on goal. And we know this guy's been like the king of volume shooting along with volume scoring, right? He finds ways to get shots on goal, unlike anybody else in the history of the sport. But let's not write this guy off just yet. Let's not forget that last year he scored 2 more goals than Matthews in one less game.
That's pretty wild, isn't it?
It is.
Like, that is pretty wild.
Like, that was like Matthews had 40. This guy had 42.
Yeah.
So I'm not ready to, it's a slow start. And you're right. Washington looks terrible. They look old as a team, not just old because of Ovi. They don't look like a contender for a playoff spot at all. But, it is,
It's early. It's very, and there's a lot of teams, like, there are teams that have had poor starts that will turn around by the end of next week.
That's the thing.
Like, not by the end of the season. By the end of next week, they'll have won 3 in a row.
You rattle off a few, and everything's
completely irrelevant.
Your
Your statistics, or your standing through 4 or 5 games. But the Caps are a team that missed the playoffs a year ago. The East, I believe, is more top heavy. I think it's going to be a grind.
Yeah.
And I think Washington's aware of that, and I don't think they really improved over the season. They kind of did what the Leafs did. Let's bring in a new coach and, maybe add a kid or 2 to the lineup, and let's hope somehow things change here. Or the Raptors, I should say, what the Raptors did in the conversation we just had. But, you make a good point about Ovechkin and how consistent he's been. And there's 2 guys that are going to be playing in their respective sports tonight where it's just like they're different beasts, because the age is almost not a part of the conversation when it comes to projection. And I'm talking about Ovechkin and LeBron James. Mm-hmm. Like, LeBron is literally the oldest guy in the NBA.
I know.
Literally the oldest. And no one is expecting that he has some off season or takes a big step back. And Ovechkin's 38. He's not the oldest guy in the league, but he's close to it. And if he scored 28 goals this year, that would be considered a disappointment.
It would be.
And yet 28 is going to put him in the top, 15% in the league in terms of goal scoring, if not higher than that.
Got 73 to go to get Gretzky.
It's incredible. Like, the 2 of them, and they're obviously they play a different sport. It's kind of apples to oranges the way they play. Ovi, score, volume shooter, LeBron, more cerebral. But in terms of their bodies, in terms of how injury, like, almost they've avoided injury throughout their whole career.
Almost injury proof.
Almost injury proof. Yeah. Yes, things have popped up in recent years. Ovi last year, LeBron the last couple of years. But pretty much 2 athletes that are almost robots on the court and ice, respectively, and they just continue to rock. And that's why it would almost be shocking if they finally took their foot off the gas.
That's the thing.
Because they're so consistent and they never get hurt.
And we become our culture, maybe because of Tom Brady and a few other examples, we become a culture where we've kind of stopped looking at the number. Right?
Yeah.
We started like a 38, 40. It's all kind of the same. Like, it just feels like they're going to keep going and going and going until they don't want to. And it's more about their desire.
Right, exactly.
Than it's about their ability, right?
Yeah, because history would suggest, like, it's going to stop and rapidly erode here
it has
at some point.
Eventually.
Like, eventually it will, but it does. It's like they are granted, and I think they deserve this, they're granted like an easing out process. Like they're going to grandfather out.
Right.
As opposed to like just abruptly, you're 38 now and you can't play anymore.
You're right.
Which is really a testament to their greatness.
Oh, no, it's an incredible thing. It really is. And I think with Ovi, like, you know, as grim as it can look at times, and it's, I guess right now is a time where it's looked kind of grim. Like everybody you talk to that's been around this guy, and I you know, you've kind of done some reporting on talking to people about how much does he want this record, and maybe like 100 goals ago, right? We were talking about this, like the Gretzky thing's out there, but it's going to take him until he's probably 40-ish to get it. Does he really want to do it? Was the question I kept asking people that had been around him, and the overwhelming answer was yeah. Like this guy, like he's
playing until
he doesn't do it public. He hasn't said it publicly very much, but you know, apparently internally, like that stuff drives him in a big way, right? And he cares about it. And yeah, like there's like a lot of people have, from the outside, it looks like he might be happy, kind of heading back to Russia, getting a beautiful dacha and next to Putin, and
that's waiting
life
for him anyway.
Yeah,
that's whether it's 39 or 43, that's coming.
Right,
that's going to be available to him. And he's never left. He's never wavered.
No.
Right? Like he could have done what Kovalchuk did, what other players have done in the past. A lot of Russian players, a lot of European players have said, I'm out of here for a bit. Yager left for a while. You know, there's been a number of guys.
Yeah, you're right. Guys have come and gone.
David Krejci left and said, I'll come back. Where Ovi has been committed to playing over here. We know what his future is going to be. We know where his allegiances lie over, you know, in Russia and all that. But in terms of him chasing this, I think, you know, you should have a passion for it because it's such an exclusive club that's going to be available to him. Like we did a Sports Center thing a couple of weeks ago, myself and Dave Poulin, when Pittsburgh and Washington were playing, you know, kind of driven by the idea of like which career will be more special, quote unquote. Not the better player. Right. I think both are top 10 players all time.
Sure.
If I'm taking a guy at 18 for the next 20 years, I would take Sid.
You would, eh?
Yes, I would take Sid over Ovi because I think he's a better, more complete player, more conducive to a winning program.
Wow. And the 3 Cups tells you.
Exactly. The 3 Cups tell you that. And his career in terms of those highlights, he is ahead of Ovechkin in terms of 3 Cups, 2 gold medals. Mm-hmm. But what I said on SportsCenter, and I believe it, is when Sid got drafted to Pittsburgh, I don't think he ever truly had a chance to be the greatest Penguin ever.
No.
Because Mario Lemieux was going to hold that title. I think the same thing applied with McDavid. Like McDavid, the second he went there, I don't think you can ever pass Gretzky, and I don't think he ever will. And I don't think Sid has passed Lemieux, and he won't pass Lemieux. Alex Ovechkin was the greatest Washington Capital player like 5 years into his career.
Yes.
Like it's not even close. So he has exclusivity over greatest player in his own franchise's history. And Sid doesn't own any statistic,
no,
you know, or any award, where if you become the greatest goal scorer ever, like undoubtedly, because the eye test would tell you that, and the stat test will tell you it if you score 895 goals, which I believe you will. No one can touch you there. Like that's a club of one. Well, and you own it. Like it's incredible.
You're right, and it's not only a club of one; it's a club of one atop the most difficult thing to do in the sport.
Yes, exactly.
We've all tried to play.
The reason you play.
We've all tried to score.
Yeah.
Most of us can't.
Yes.
You know? The guy that sits over there was pretty damn good at it.
Yeah.
And you realize how special it is when you see it. When you play with a guy that can score 40 goals in the NHL, you know.
That's an exclusive
You
club.
see how they shoot the puck and how they put it in the net, and you're like, the rest of us on this ice can't do that.
Right.
That guy's got a special talent.
Yes.
And then Ovi's standing on top all those guys, all those special guys who could do that skill. And there's it's not a big number, but he's at the top. Mm-hmm. And it's not just like he's been the most consistent. He's averaged 50 goals a season from the moment he stepped on the ice. I mean, it's incredible.
It's incredible. And he hasn't scored yet this year. So we'll see what he's got for the Leafs starting at 6 o'clock. You can watch that game on TSN4. O's on the panel tonight. That's where O is. Noodles is calling the Senators game. So there's hockey going on, nonstop today and tonight. So O and Noodles will be back tomorrow. Dave Feschuk's in here from the Toronto Star. NBA starting tonight. We'll continue to look ahead to that. Raptors starting tomorrow night. Darko Rajakovic will join us in about an hour. But one of the 2 teams for the World Series have punched their ticket. It went down last night. Texas pulled it off. They went into Houston, won Game 7 last night, won Game 6 and 7 last night. So we'll catch up with Steve Phillips, get his take on that in Game 7. Phillies Diamondbacks in the NLCS go tonight. We'll tee that up. Steve Phillips will join us next. OverDrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line of the final score. Texas Rangers, road teams, ALCS. If you're at home, you can't win.
How do you explain that?
Cannot win at home in the ALCS. And the Rangers are through to the World Series. They were dead in the water. Remember when they showed up in Toronto for that 4-game series? They were the biggest boondoggle in baseball. Like, they couldn't hit, they couldn't pitch, they were a disaster, and they were puking away an AL West lead that they had all year.
Yeah.
And they still didn't win the West. Houston did. They get in via wild card, and now they're in the World Series. And they might play Arizona if the Diamondbacks can do what they did last night and do it tonight. To chat about it, we're joined now by our TSN MLB analyst, Steve Phillips. Can you explain this for us, Steve? How are the Texas Rangers in the World Series?
Guys, it's good to be with you. I have absolutely no idea. And it has been the craziest year of the playoffs in that, you know, the Rangers, when they lost to Seattle and they ended up tied in the standings with Houston, but Houston got the tiebreaker for the division championship. And it meant that they had to then fly to play Tampa Bay. They flew from Seattle to Tampa Bay. They thought they were going to go home and have 5 days off, and instead they had to fly. They passed over Dallas on the way to Tampa Bay, is the story, and that they waved to their families down below. Then they go into Tampa. They win they sweep the series there. Then they go from there to Baltimore, and they end up sweeping the series against. They were winning all the road games there in the series and sweeping that. They've won 8 straight road games. They're 8-0 on the road. Then all of the road games are won in this series. In Houston, they can't win at home. And so it's just the thing about Texas is that they're a very streaky team in both directions. So they're streaky hot and they're streaky cold. And we saw it all year, right? So they came in, remember, they swept the Blue Jays. Then they went to take on Cleveland and they got swept by Cleveland. And so it's just that it's just been such a weird year. Part of it is, kind of quirky with teams that can win at home and they don't feel good or they lose at home like Houston does. Part of it is just the way the pitching has lined up. But they're a team driven by their offense. And, Bruce Bochy, who, won 3 championships with San Francisco, managed teams that had really good pitching and good enough offense. This is a team that has really good offense and, I guess, good enough pitching to get where they're going. And it's just been such a quirky year because things that normally are most important haven't been nearly as important this season. I think it's more about timing and good fortune and getting hot at the right time than it is, I think, any real change in the dogmas of what is most important in the game.
Yeah, I think you're right. Although, Texas was the hottest hitting team in baseball, up until basically Labor Day or middle of August. I mean, they were absolutely crushing baseballs, and that's what they've done consistently throughout the playoffs. And you mentioned Bruce Bochy, who is not young, and he certainly is not a new progressive manager. And up here in Toronto, people are like, that's interesting. Bruce Bochy. Wonder what he's bringing to the table. Dusty Baker. I wonder what he's bringing to the table down in Houston. Like, do you make anything of the kind of old school Bochy here, and even the old school Dusty Baker, for that matter, who's now out? They were left standing, and these young progressive managers in front offices, they were home, teeing it up.
Yeah, I think when Nate Eovaldi was pitching in Game 1 against the Astros, and he ended up with bases loaded, nobody out, and he had Altuve come to the plate. Now, Altuve had 5 home runs against Eovaldi in his career. Like, he owns Eovaldi. And Bruce Bochy let him face him in, like, the 6th inning of the game. And I'm like, wait a minute. Managers don't let guys, nobody out in the 6th inning. They don't let the starter face the lineup for the 3rd time around. They take him out of the game, bring in a reliever. And in this case, it was a guy who owned Eovaldi, and he still left him in the game. And he got out of the jam without giving up any runs. I'm like, who does this? Like, nobody does this anymore. But Bochy knows his players. He knows the situation. And, he wasn't perfect in these playoffs. He put Leclerc in the 8th inning too many times, I think, and wore him down a little bit. And then after the delay with the brawl the other day, he wasn't the right guy. And Chapman's been good at times, but then, gets yanked quickly on it. And so, but his players play for him. And these veteran managers, numbers matter, but the context matters more. And yet, you know what? We see potentially Torey Lovullo, the manager of Arizona, potentially they're going to pull off a huge upset, the third upset of the postseason for them. And he pulled Merrill Kelly yesterday when I thought, how in the world would he possibly pull this guy out of the game?
Yeah.
He let him face, for the third time through the lineup, he let him face Schwarber, Turner, and Harper. He got 2 strikeouts and a ground out, 1, 2, 3 in the fifth, and then he takes him out of the game. And Kelly was like, wait a minute. He literally said to him, did you just see what I did? Have you been watching? And he takes him out of the game. And then 4 relievers come in, they get everybody out, and they advance. And so, I don't know. It's just more, in the end, it's the players either get them out or they don't. They either hit the ball or they don't. Managers can line certain guys up. And sometimes, the end, I guess, justifies the means. And you can make crazy decisions, but if it works, you're a genius. And if it doesn't, then you're the town idiot. And it's amazing how that's turned in this game.
Well, Steve, you talk about pitchers. You either get them out or you don't. With hitters in this game these days, they either strike out or they hit a home run, and nobody embodies that better than Adolis Garcia. How do you explain this incredible story, Steve? A guy who, as recently as February of 2021, was available to every team in Major League Baseball because he'd been DFA'd and essentially waived by the Rangers, and then was invited back when nobody wanted him, was invited back as a non-roster training camp guy. And a little more than 2 years later, he's sitting here having hit 5 home runs and 15 RBIs in the ALCS to be the ALCS MVP. I mean, what do you make of it?
Yeah, it really is an amazing story, a great story. And there was another Cardinals outfielder who got away. So Randy Arozarena was a Cardinals outfielder. And they traded him to Tampa Bay, and he turns into a superstar in the postseason. Adolis Garcia was a Cardinals outfielder. They put him in a trade to Texas, and it's taken him some time to develop. But I think sometimes the Cuban players, that transition, we assume it's going to be easy, but it's not, and so it took him a little time to figure himself out, confidence and everything else. But he's always been a talented guy with tools that that haven't quite developed into skills, but now he's turning them into skills, and he's red hot. I mean, believe it or not, there were a couple of weeks in my 7-year minor league career that I was really hot too. And like you would have seen me in those 7 weeks and thought, man, this guy's going to be an all-star player at the major league level. And then, but the rest of the weeks mattered too. And it took him some time to figure it out, but he is on fire right now. And he's had a great season. He's a tenacious competitor. He's a big personality. And he's surrounded in a lineup of a lot of other really good hitters, which means he's got a lot of traffic on base around him, and pitchers then have to come over the plate and try to get him out rather than throw it off the plate, and it gives him some pitches that he can drive.
Do teams and GMs kick themselves about one like that? Like, we could have had this guy 2 years ago, Steve, and we missed on him. Like, the whole league missed, the entire Major League Baseball missed on him. But is anybody kicking themselves that, geez, we should have had this guy?
Oh, everybody is. Yeah. I mean, think about when I was GM, and Albert Pujols is going to be the rookie. I see him in spring training with the Cardinals. They were near us when I was with the Mets in Port St. Lucie, and I'm like, who's this guy? And I went to our scouting department. I said, what's this guy's story? He was like a 12th round draft pick out of a junior college in Kansas. In Missouri, and I'm like, well, what did we think of him? Well, he was a little overweight and everything else. But, here's the thing. The Cardinals, as much as they can claim they got him, they were wrong for the 11 rounds before they took him in the 12th round, because you should never risk, taking a player that good and passing over him for 11 rounds when he turned into be a Hall of Fame player. So, it's just, things happen sometimes where players blossom, they develop, they fill out physically. But yes, I think teams are kicking themselves for sure. I mean, think about this. Every team in baseball has to be kicking themselves that they didn't trade a right-handed reliever to the Dodgers to get Yordan Alvarez.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Remember, Yordan Alvarez came from the Dodgers to the Houston Astros for Josh Fields, a reliever, more middle relief guy that, was no great reliever in his day. It was just a serviceable reliever. They got Yordan Alvarez for him. And so, yeah, I think that everybody has that story of the guy they gave up. Everybody has that story about the guy they got, or the people they took in the draft or they passed over in the draft. And, I mean, listen, in 1981, I got drafted in the 5th round by the Mets. In the 12th round of that draft, the Mets drafted Roger Clemens out of San Jacinto Junior College in 1981. And they offered him $25,000. He wanted $35,000. The scouting director, Joe McIlvain, flew down to Texas 3 times, got rained out all 3 times, and he went down there to watch him pitch to see if they should give him the extra $10,000. They didn't give it to him. In the meantime, they had offered me $25,000, and and they ended up giving me $42,000. So effectively, I got Roger Clemens at $10,000, and the Mets got me, and they didn't get Roger Clemens, and he went on to go to transfer to Texas, and obviously turned into one of the best pitchers in the history of the game. So everybody's got that story, and unfortunately, I'm the butt end of that story for the Mets when it comes to Roger Clemens.
Worked out for you, buddy. It's all good with Steve Phillips. So you mentioned the Dodgers, and with Houston out now, this will be the first time since 2016 the World Series will not feature one of the Astros or the Dodgers, which is a remarkable statistic and truly a testament to how great those two teams have been for so long. But everyone's going to want to write off Houston, right? I want to write off Houston. I've had enough. They've been in the ALCS 7 years in a row. Is that a smart bet, in your opinion, to suggest this is the end of the road for the Astros?
Oh, no. They'll win the division again next year, and they'll be in the ALCS again next year. I mean, listen, Verlander's back. Christian Javier, Framber Valdez, their key pitchers are back. Altuve's getting older. He's 34, but he's still, an elite performer. Jose Abreu is getting older, but he turned it on at the end of the season. And so, no, they're going to be right back there again. Now, they don't have a great farm system right now. That's what happens when you win for a long period of time. You use your farm system to trade, to get pieces to help yourself keep winning. And so, but Dana Brown, their general manager, came over from Atlanta. He's part of what has made great drafts for the Atlanta Braves over the years. He'll have his first draft coming up, or I guess he had his first draft last year, and he'll take a little time to see some of those players develop, but no way am I writing them off. Now, we don't know who's going to manage. It seems like Dusty Baker's probably done managing. They're going to find somebody else to run the team. But, I mean, I think a lot of good people are going to raise their hand and say, I'll manage that team. So we'll see where they go. I could see, a Buck Showalter who, is out with the Mets, but a veteran guy. He's a win-now manager, and he could certainly be somebody that might be a fit down there. And he's not opposed to analytics and numbers, although Dana Brown not, nearly the same as what they've had in the past. So I'm not writing them off. I think Texas is good, but I don't love their pitching. They're not going to have DeGrom next year. Scherzer's going to be a year older, and he's eating up some of that money. They're probably not going to be able to re-sign Jordan Montgomery. They'll be a good offensive team, but and I think Seattle's a good team, but they've got holes. So the Astros are going to be right back in it again next year.
With Steve Phillips. So Game 7, Phillies Diamondbacks tonight. Phillies were up 2-0 going down to Arizona. They came home up 3-2. If the Diamondbacks end up winning this tonight, is it a choke job by the Phillies? Like how will we describe this in retrospect if it's Arizona that ends up winning this?
Well, it'll be a huge, huge, huge upset. But I thought Milwaukee was better than Arizona, only because the season indicated that they were. I thought the Dodgers were better than Arizona. And so I think the Phillies are the better team. They were better during the course of the season. But, it's the team that plays the best. And so, I think Torey Lovullo's done an amazing job. I think he's done some crazy things about when he's taking guys out, who he's put in. He trusted Saul Frank, the left-handed reliever, right? He took Brandon Pfaadt, who's going to start today, out of the game the other day when he was mowing them down with 9 strikeouts and nobody could hit him. And he goes to his bullpen. And then he took Merrill Kelly out yesterday. And, it's sort of the new wave of managing, and he mapped it out before the game. And he had, similar to the John Schneider situation, it just worked out for Torey Lovullo, where it didn't work out for John Schneider. So they're a fun team, an interesting team. It sure feels like they're a year or two too soon, but it will be a real disappointment if the Phillies don't find a way to win this. They are the better team, and they're at home where it felt like nobody was going to be able to beat them. So, but I think whoever gets out to the early lead is going to make a difference. Arizona's got to get the lead and take the crowd out of it. Mm-hmm. If the crowd becomes a factor for the length of the game, then I think Philadelphia beats them. They could probably pull away late and get it done. But I tell you, Arizona's proven us wrong all season long. I thought it could be a sweep after they lost the first 2 games in Philly. The fact they've come back to extend it to a 7th game is absolutely just stunning turn of events.
It'll be a fun one tonight, Steve. Enjoy it, and we'll do it again soon. Thank you, buddy.
You bet, guys. Thanks for having me. Have a good one.
Steve Phillips, our TSN baseball analyst. I don't have a dog in the fight, but I'd much prefer Philadelphia to win because they're much more interesting.
Yeah.
Like, I know the Blue Jay connection, the idea of Marino, Gurriel playing in a World Series.
We're both playing great, by the way.
Playing great, like impactful, production in terms of driving this team to a World Series and maybe following it all the way through. But Arizona, Texas World Series, like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's not overly compelling.
No, it's not. And I'll tell you what, like, I don't have a dog in the fight either. We know who Ross Atkins is cheering for.
Oh, yeah.
He'd rather not be reminded of the Gurriel-Moreno trade.
You imagine Varsho's down there for, whatever would be Game 3 of the World Series, throwing out the ceremonial first pitch. I allowed this to happen by getting flipped to Toronto.
Exactly. But I got to say, like, watching games set in Philly, like, that crowd is
incredible.
Crazy.
And Bryce Harper,
I
want to see Bryce Harper continue to play. Like, I'll admit it. I'm not, the biggest super fan ever, but he's a really interesting player.
Schwarber's pretty fun to watch.
And Schwarber's incredible. Yeah. And Castellanos has had a great run, obviously. And, yeah, exactly. Philly's just it's more of a sports town. It's
They
raw.
care so much, man. Like, I've been lucky enough to go to almost pretty much every good sports town in North America multiple times. And, like, there's something special about Philly. They're famous for being mean, and they are, and they can be. And it can get ugly when the home teams aren't playing well, and can get ugly for the visitors. But man, they love sports.
Yes.
Like, there's a real, like, you don't get that kind of passion. I hate to say it. You don't get that kind of passion. I guess the Blue Jays fans in 2015-16, it kind of felt the same.
No, there's something, but it's a different vibe in American cities.
There's a different vibe down there, man.
Yeah, in American cities, especially big cities that aren't like New York, Chicago, LA, or New York, LA in particular, are just different beasts. Yeah. Different beasts. But
celebrity culture, a lot more money.
And there's a lot of people that grew up in different parts of their country that moved there. And
True.
Like Philly, it's like this is going to sound so ignorant, but I don't know anyone that's like, I'm moving to Philly. Right. Obviously that happens. But the point I'm making is it seems much more like parochial, basically.
Yeah, they're from there.
Boston's
they're
like
of
that.
the place. They're generations of
it's
the
like
place.
This generation after generation after generation, Philly, Philly, Philly. And you love the Eagles. You love the Sixers. Like if you're not a Philly fan in Philly, it's like what happened to you?
Yeah.
Where in New York, Toronto, like not everyone's a Leaf fan, not everyone's a Blue Jay fan. Raptors fans. It's, people from across the country move here, people from all over the world, even people that are from here, like generations. They grew up fans of different teams.
There's just something about the American culture. I don't know why. I've never been able to put my finger on it, but they get how to be a fan, like in a way that maybe some Canadians
It's a lifestyle thing.
It's a lifestyle thing.
And
it's handed down. I think it's handed down from generation to generation to generation. And look, I mean, Leaf fans don't care. They're not guilty or feeling guilty that they're not great. They don't provide a great atmosphere for the Leafs. They want those seats, right? And they deserve them. It's go to the highest bidder. But, man, there's something about the cauldron of that place right now. Like, it's going to be wild.
Philly's a different.
But Steve's right. Like, if Arizona, reels off a couple of home runs out of the gate and quiets the place down, suddenly that can feel pretty pressurized.
It'll
for
flip
the home
quickly.
team, right?
It'll flip quickly. For sure. We saw it last night when Texas started blowing the doors off Houston. It got quiet there real quick.
Yeah.
Real quick. Monday Nighter went down last night. Minnesota picked up a win. We'll get into it. Mike Johnson coming up ringside tonight. He's down there in Washington. Leafs Capitals on TSN 4. We'll tee up the game with Johnny. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. All right, Darko Rajakovic will join us at 5:30. Mike Johnson coming up ringside. Leafs Capitals, 6 o'clock on TSN 4, 6 p.m. start on a Tuesday. But the Leafs are 3-2. They pulled one out the other night. Joseph Wall in net. That's
big
the story.
moment.
It seems like a potential watershed moment.
Yeah.
Potential. Is the door open? Sheldon Keefe told us the door's open. Ilya Samsonov, they're not committed to him. They didn't give him a 5-year deal.
No.
And I think it's probably in the best interest for Samsonov to get a little bit of a jab. He hasn't played great. You know, his stats in the playoffs last year were not great.
Not great.
So, you know, you're still in a position here where nothing is being given to you. And the Leafs would indicate that based on the way they negotiated with him.
Yeah.
You take a guy all the way to arbitration, that is a big sign in the modern NHL.
Oh, yeah. And there's always a lot of concern that you can damage a guy's confidence in an arbitration hearing, right? Maybe that's what we're seeing here.
Things can be said in there.
Maybe 3 goals on 4 shots.
Yeah.
Was a bit of an indicator that all is not well in the mind of Ilya Samsonov.
That'll come up the next time, I guarantee it.
Yeah, exactly.
They go back to arbitration,
Yeah,
which I'm
you
not
want to
sure is
negotiate
possible.
again? Let's bring up a certain night.
Game 4 of the Game 5 of the season.
Game 5, yes, it was Game 5.
Yeah, Tampa. 3 goals on 4 shots. Can't happen.
Not pretty.
Can't happen. So, the Leafs in action, kicking off what's going to be a wild night in the NHL. I mean, it's
a game every 15 minutes.
Every 15 minutes.
Or I guess, 6, 6:30, 6:45, 7, 7:15, 7:30. Basically.
Keeps going and go all the way up to 11 p.m.
Yeah.
The last game's at 11. I think Vegas, LA, I want to say. So more on that in the next hour. Mike Johnson will join us. Darko Rajakovic, the NBA tips off tonight. We'll get to that as well. Confirm and deny still to come. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app.